Let's move into our game of the week. Game of the week review. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-doo. This one's a little longer just to make sure you send me a song.
Please.
Our review is not of a game. It is our first expansion review on the podcast. It is the incredible, classic, modern classic. I am not being hyperbolic in saying that. I think Great Western Trail is probably the best Euro design of the last, I'm going to say, 5 to 10 years maybe. I think it's, to me, one of the most impressive. It is from Alexander Pfister.
It's a mainstay of our group. It came out.
It came out in 2016.
Yeah.
We've been playing it consistently for 3 years, which says a lot. That does not happen often with our group. Alexander Pfister also made one of my favorite games, Mombasa. Broom Service is fun. I enjoy his latest, Blackout Hong Kong. I feel like I'm the only one who does it.
I always
Isle of Skye is a very popular game that I've played as in the app, but never in the full version. But Alexander Pfister is somebody who anything it comes out with, I'm pretty much going to buy it and at least give it a shot. Great Western Trail, if you're not familiar with it, is a very interesting Euro. It doesn't. When I first played it, it definitely felt to me like I have never played this game before. All of its mechanics are mildly familiar. There is a worker placement is not what I would call it. Let's see what BGG actually says. So they
like
call
a
it
board deformation.
They call it a deck building, hand management, point-to-point movement game.
Point-to-point movement?
Point-to-point movement is the mechanism that they're using. Because it is not worker placement. You start your worker, you have a certain amount of moves he can make, and he or she moves along the track, and the track gets longer to a certain extent as more spaces are filled in. So those spaces are buildings.
You're creating the board together as a group.
Right. So there is so let me tell you the story of Great Western Trail. So Great Western Trail is, we are all cattle herders who are carrying our stock of cattle from Texas to Kansas City. And we start in Texas and we while our way all the way to Kansas City, wherein we turn in our herd of cattle and are paid for them. And then we do it again. And as we go along the path, new buildings pop up along the path, which makes our route slower because we have to stop at all these places. And along the route, you can pick up new cows, buy more cows, diversify your cows, do lots of different things. You can help build the buildings on the road.
Well, you can get into being more of a builder than a cowpoke. You can get into being more of a conductor than a builder.
Right. That's right. So there are certain. You're also helping to build the train line, and your cows only are delivered as far as the train line goes. So thematically, people are only going to buy your cow if they can ship it from the place you're selling it to. So the farther the train line goes, the more money you can make on your cows, because now your cows can be sold to Kansas City, but then the meat can be sent all the way to New York City. And once you can help get it all the way to New York City, you'll make a lot more money than just selling it at Kansas City.
So the amount we're talking about cows should be a hint why the expansion is useful.
Exactly. So in the original game, if you get points for cows. So let's say this: cows are cards. There are actual cards in your hand. Everybody starts with, I believe, a 14-hand deck,
and cows become money.
And cows are turned into money. So in that deck of cards, we each start with our own personalized deck that's exactly the same. And then we will, as we buy cows, change our deck. And it's classic deck building kind of rules, wherein you're going through your hand, and then you draw all up to your hand size, and you discard your hand, and you get new cards. And your cards are going to be cows that range from a value of 1 to 5, and different colors are what matters. So when you get to Kansas City, you only get paid out for every different type of cow. So if you have 2 green cows, you're only going to get paid for one of them. So your goal by the time you get to Kansas City is to have a large, diverse herd of cows.
Yes.
That used to be pretty much that wasn't the only way to win, but if you didn't collect cows, you had a very hard time winning.
I think you would have to be, because there is a certain amount where you're going to be spreading no matter what, because there's a board state that kind of dictates what you're going to be able to do. Just like all these Euros, there's a little bit of determinism in that, even though it's kind of random the way it comes out. So you had to have a cow strategy, but you could kind of get into something else.
Right. So there were 3 main strategies before, which is builder strategy, which is specializing in guys that you add to your tableau that make it so you can build higher cost buildings. And buildings are worth victory points at the end of the game, but they also are specialized places that only your worker can stop on and do very powerful things.
And some small penalties to other players.
Yes.
Sometimes.
Well, and sometimes when you move through them, you have to pay people to go past it. And there are often circuitous routes you could take to get there, but people start building in such a way where you're always going to have to go through somebody you pay to go past their building.
But it did feel weaker before. It didn't feel like if you were all cow, all in, and nobody else challenged you on that, you were taking it.
You won, yeah. But if you didn't buy any cows, I don't know if there was enough points in any other strategy to really win. If everybody was playing cows, if nobody's playing cows, sure. But if at least one person is going full cows, I don't think you can ignore cows at all. I think you have to at least dip your toe into cows.
Yes.
Yes. Which is a sentence I have never said before.
We will say it one more time because that is this game.
So the new expansion, the main thing that we are excited about is that you can ignore cows and you can win.
I mean, I think you are still challenged in that regard, and just in the sense that it's still a certain amount of the way you accrue money, but there are other ways now. There are definitely the scales have been tipped, and that now you can be expansionist in a way that the previous game. And it's interesting too because they didn't change too much of the actual personal player board. There's just a small expansion going on at the bottom of the board.
Right. So let's talk about what comes in the box. So you actually get a new addition to the game board, to the actual board. It goes atop it, and it actually has a very interesting little hinge where it sits atop it, and then
they knew
it slides nicely in there so that it can't be moved around too much. Because usually, if you try to put a board on top of another board, they slide around a bit. But this sort of locks in place nicely, and it replaces the train tracks at the top of the board from the first version or from the base game, and it now adds all these different branching trees from there. And you have a new addition as well to your player board, which is station tokens and all these little houses. Think little Monopoly pieces, but wood. And you now are building a route throughout the north. There's rails to the north of Kansas City. So all these different towns up there, and you are building station towns and little places up there, wherein I guess thematically you are receiving bonuses to your cattle lines and sending people out there to help. I don't know. I'm struggling to think thematically what it means.
Thematically, I kind of got the sense that you were building new way stations that the train was going. So you were building literally stations that you were expanding your market.
Well, here's what here's what BGG says. I believe this is on the box. With this expansion, players deliver their herds to Northeast United States with stops in Chicago, Detroit, and New York City, amongst other cities, in an effort to become the most successful cow rancher this side of the Mississippi.
So you're the robber barons of cattle.
Yes, exactly. But what it does is, now here's an interesting thing. So it has definitely made it so that you do not have to go cows. Totally. Even if every other player is going full cows, you can still win with cows. But what it has done, though, is that now you cannot ignore the station tokens to the north.
Yeah.
I do not believe now that you can win the game without going to the station tokens. But I'm not saying that's 100% sure. I'd say I've played probably 5 or 6 times. I think our group, that's about as much as we've played. That's a lot for a 2 to 3 hour game, and that's a good amount for us. I think I'm fully apt to review a game after 6 or so plays, especially when I've played the base game 100 times probably. Right. It seems to me though, but actually I don't believe this is a detriment, because the cow strategy, there's one way to do it, right? You're trying to get a lot of money. And you're trying to thin your hand so your best cows come out, and you're trying to rush. You're trying to just rush that loop to Kansas City and rush your cows and get them before other people. And
I will say that some of that cow strategy is very dependent on the board state, where if you don't get the cattle hands, the cowboys, they don't come out at the right time, and they get swooped up by somebody else who maybe isn't even trying to do the cow strategy, but they just happen to be buying the cheapest new worker that comes out, which could be a cowboy. Suddenly you can't play your game because you literally are locked out of certain cows.
So there was a fun jockeying for position game, and it became a race to a certain extent. Is who's going to get those 5s and 4s first, who's going to really chalk up all those cow points. And to do that strategy wasn't necessarily all that fun when you've done it many times. I think now you do have to do the rails to the north stuff. You can't ignore it. You have to place your station tokens up there. But there are so many different ways you can do it, and so many different things they will benefit. Yeah. So I think I don't think it feels samey to do it every time. Now I think you have to do it. You don't have to go all in, but I don't think you can ignore it unless everybody else ignores it, which is crazy, and nobody's going to do that. So if you fully ignore it, I don't think you can be competitive. But I don't think that by not ignoring it, you can't follow almost any strategy you can think of which I think is a great sign of solid design and a good balancing.
And I do think it does something really nice where before there was it was hard to ignore the race element that you would have to run as fast as you can because somebody could easily take the momentum and just go.
Yeah.
This slows the game down slightly. There's certain actions you only can do when you're hitting certain spaces, and to necessitate going through the north, you have to be doing these extra actions that your new board unlocked. But if you're familiar with the game, they're basically the bonus action.
Yeah.
So if you weren't hitting them at the right time, you're not getting your pieces up there. So you have to kind of slow down slightly, and so it makes it go from like a fast medium weight euro to being like a mid fast, because I mean it still plays quickly and you can get through. The rolls aren't overly onerous.
Turns are fast,
but like it is that kind of thing where there's a little bit of bonus action. There's a little bit of like comboing that's happening with the upper board, and that's very satisfying. You can kind of start to build into these super turns. The game already had built in. There was plenty of places on the board where you could have something that really unlocked a lot, but now it's really satisfying in a way. I enjoyed it more because of the expansion, which is saying quite a lot.
And highly variable too, because you get all these different tokens that come out. So now there's small towns, medium towns, and large towns. And the medium towns all have these very powerful one-time tokens that you only see, I think, 6 of them in the game, and there's 10 of them every time. And so they're all going to be in different places. There are 2 very big end game decisions you have for your train. So if you go a train strategy before, it was all about getting to was it New York was the end of the line? No, it was what's the big end of the line one that was important before? Philadelphia? I'll forget. It'll come to me.
It's not San Francisco because that's...
No, it was San Francisco. No, you're right. That was, yeah. So getting to San Francisco was your goal before. And then getting there multiple times, you get points for every time you got there. But now there is San Francisco and New York City. And you can go to San Francisco and you are rewarded for how many station tokens you placed out. So if every 3, you unlock a bell on your player order. And at the end, I think you get 2 points for every bell on that for disc you have there. So you could max out at 10 points per times you've gotten to San Francisco, which is big. But now you can go to New York and get a station agent token, which are the sort of permanent end game scoring options, and usually a little bit of a upgrade to how much money you get for cows every round by your certificates going up. So those can be really valuable. And also there's a first one in gets the pick of the 4 when they get to New York, and everybody else gets to pick one less. So those are even if you go the train strategy, you have 2 big decisions of, okay, what's my end game? Like, what am I really going towards here?
I will say, though, I think with the powers that you gain by the extra stuff in the north, that you're going to be quicker. Like, I was pretty early to New York. got to San Francisco at the right time, but I still lost by a bunch. Because...
So let's talk about what happened in our actual game. So what was your strategy and how did it work out?
I wasn't going super heavy cow. I was trying at first to do a little bit more of maybe a builder thing. I was the person with the most buildings on the board by the end of the game. But that being said, I never really honed in on a strategy. I kind of got a little lost in the weeds. Part of it was because I just kept on not getting to the right place at the right time with the amount of resources I would have needed to really unlock it. So although I tried to get the speed up of the game, I tried to run around a little bit, I wasn't taking my time in the right places, I realized in hindsight. But I didn't do badly. I got second.
You got second place. You had 82 points, which is a very respectable score. Tom had 103. And if we look at his points, he went full cow strategy. Yeah. And while he did win, it's not because of his cow strategy. He actually diversified in a lot of areas. He had 32 points in cows, but he had 23 points in objective cards, which is an interesting thing because that's something that was sort of ignored in the base game. They were pretty slow. They'd slow your hand down because they literally clog your hand up, and they usually give you good power. But now there are ways to sort of cycle through your hand faster now because we have these chits. Yeah. These new what were you calling them? You had a funny word
doublers.
For them. Doublers. But they're basically ditch 2 cards, draw 2 cards. Yeah. And so these allow you to cycle through your hand faster, and I think that makes objective cards more valuable because they're not clogging up your hand as much.
Did you notice one of the things that got me slowed is because I got one of these bonus chits that basically makes it so that every doubler you have, or the take 2, give 2, every 2 you had gave you 5 points. And so I had 5 at the end that gave me a total of 10 points. But I should have been using them to maximize my end of round.
Right.
And so I kind of caught myself in one of these things that's classic in a lot of these games. You get stuck on what ends up being not a big point earner. 10 points, hey, it's not bad. But if I could have just gotten that money earlier in the game, I probably would have done much better. So.
Yeah. You also you did very well in your station tokens and your objectives. I went full train.
Yeah.
I went full engineer, and tried to place as many valuable station tokens as possible and valuable discs in far locations. A lot of the new Rails to the North locations, when you reach them, they give you huge points, 25 points, I think, for getting to Philadelphia, 10 points for getting to other places like that. So I was able to rack up 25 points just off dropping those discs, which was pretty good. I came in third at 70. But I think I realized about halfway through the game that my strategy was going to be a little too slow for how fast you and Tom were pushing.
If you just had one more round.
That I do think if I had one more round, I would have been able to probably get another 20 points out of it. Yeah.
That's amazing. But at the same time, we should say that you have limited number of station tokens, and I ran out of them. I think Tom ran out of them. Yeah. Those station tokens actually, and if you're not careful, you're not going to go everywhere with them.
Yeah, no, you have to pick your route. Yeah,
and that's something that I think with increased play that I'm excited again that it's on our 8x8 that I'm gonna figure out a little bit better where to go.
Yeah, Dimitri had a little bit of a slower game coming in fourth, but we all tried different things, and I think this was sort of one of those like let's push the game a little bit and see. So I really wanted to see if I really just focused on train, which also has to have a little bit of cow in it because I need to be able to push my train farther and get more money paid for it. So it was sort of a cow train strategy, and I think it can work. I just think I didn't min max it as well as I could have.
As one other element of the review, there is another side game that's happening where your locomotive is being pushed along. And it has a position information. Like it, depending on where it is, you can get certain bonuses. And early in the game, Dimitri starts pushing, and there's a little bit of a leapfrog aspect. And so I noticed that I was getting a little caught up in his game that way. Right. I was trying to leapfrog him at the right time and get to the right position and get these extra chits. And the extra chits really did help me. But it's interesting how, I mean, it is part of the way that we're playing together at times. But also, I think I got caught up in somebody else's game slightly, whereas I could have been focused on mine.
That can happen a lot, especially when you're sort of in the same loop as them. You get in a point where you're sort of in the same loop, and you end up realizing you're chasing the same sort of cowboy builder or whichever ones you're trying to get.
Or just it looks bright and shiny. It looks like a good strategy. It's like, maybe it's a weakness of me as a gamer is that sometimes I'll be a little flat-footed. I won't know exactly what I want to do, and I see somebody doing something. Oh, that's really compelling and interesting, and it looks like it's a strategy. And
so Tom felt that there is a building in the game that pushes it towards a certain strategy a little too much. And he I think it's building 2, which is just there's making your own building wherein you can buy cows. So now you have 2 places on the board to buy cows. Yeah. And he felt that forces everybody to go into cows a bit.
Well, notice he did.
And he did, and he won, but he didn't win just on that. I mean, he really did a shotgun approach, and he got a lot of points in a lot of different areas.
Say he got into cows early, and he really led that charge. He also has.
He had 32 points in cows. I had 19. I had the second most points in cows. Yeah. I don't think he build his building to buy. Yeah, he did build his build. He did build the building. He told us that sort of forces everybody into a cow strategy. But I'm not ready to say that matters anymore. I think that did force everybody into a very specific strategy in the base game. I'm not ready to say that it does that with the expansion. I still think the expansion would allow you, and maybe Tom likes to think that if he can do it, then he can always do it. But I think he might have a little more experience with the game and be a little bit better in general at strategy games. So we have a little bit of catch up to do. But if given time, I think he could push that as much as he wants, and if one of us was doing our other strategy a little bit better, I don't think that he would take the victory every time.
I agree, and I think we can have an awareness of it. But I think Tom also he's very Babe Ruth about it. He pointed towards the outfield and hit it that way because he called that kind of play, and then he did it, and we should have been a little more cognizant of that. We should have had a little bit more idea of his board presence.
Yeah, and he's a little more willing to house rule things, I think, a little quicker than I would. I in fact would rather not play a game than house rule it usually. I always assume the designer knows better than me. It's not what I do for a living. I don't design board games for a living. Trey, he's allowed to maybe criticize it a little bit more. He does that for a living. I don't, and so I will always assume the designer play tested this much more than I've played it, and knows that maybe it's a skill deficiency issue as opposed to a broken mechanism issue. I thoroughly enjoyed the game. It was as fun as it ever was. I think it's a real classic, amazing game. I would play it anytime it comes out, and I do think that we should be. That those initial choices really do affect the board game more than just the play. And great, so just some stats here: 2 to 4 players. So this is a great 2-player game, great 3-player game, great 4-player game. Probably shines at 4. Yes. I think 3 is pretty great too. It's a little bit faster. I've played it as 2. It's enjoyable. if you are looking for a medium to heavy game, this is, and if you only owned one medium to heavy Euro in your whole collection, this would be it to me. Now, it's not medium. I think this is heavier than Lorenzo. I think this is heavier than Coimbra.
There's a lot of different pieces with different positions on your board. There's a lot of little exceptions that are happening that are really important.
Yeah.
And so it's worth knowing the rules. It's worth knowing the game.
This is a bad first board game. Mm-hmm. It is complicated. There's a lot going on, but it is worth the time investment. And I would not call it a heavy game. This is at about the same level as Trois, which to me is medium heavy. It's on the heavy end of medium. But I think I would say it's a masterpiece. I would say it's one of the greatest board games ever made. And I think this expansion balances it in a way that was necessary for people who played it a lot and who found the cow strategy a little samey after a lot of games. I mean, even if you want to just buy the base game, you're going to have a great time. It's going to take a long time before you maybe feel like, oh, I'm sort of stuck in one strategy.
I've seen people win with other strategies. I remember Paul won with a builder strategy once that was, and also I think I've seen Tom win with a similar
but it can depend on sort of what comes out, how the board state is. Yeah.
But it was awesome. I mean, it's really nice how it's unfolded.
And if you like deck building games, it's going to scratch that itch. If you like hardcore, resource management games, it's going to scratch that itch. If you like map building games, it's going to scratch that. I mean, it does a lot of different things, and it puts them all together, and it creates a flavor that is very unique.
Yeah.
And it's also just a cool theme. It's nice to have, there's not many sort of fun Western themes. Tom definitely LARPed it and spoke in a Southern accent the entire time. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Did not stop, kept doing it.
But at the same time, I mean, it does present all the difficulties that these heavy to medium to heavy Euros do, where it's like the theme, you could kind of throw it out, but it does add a flavor. It's something to it.
Totally.
Something where the dust.
Oh, I love the theme. Yeah. I mean, we put on some Sergio Leone music and, we get into it. So I could not be recommending this more. If you don't own the base game, I really take a look at it, watch some videos, read the rule book, decide if it's something that you think you or your group would be interested in. And if you do make that investment, I think spending another $25 and getting the expansion is going to be worth it. I wouldn't jump into your first game ever with the expansion. I'd get to know the game a little bit before you add it, because it does add a whole new layer,
new dimension
of the teach. I would never... Well, it depends. If I was playing a new game with somebody who was not very experienced in board games, I would not play Great Western Trail with them. But if I did, I definitely wouldn't use the expansion on my first play. I think that's just another little bit of confusion for them.
Especially if you're not utilizing it, again, you're probably not in the game the same way. So,
exactly. Yeah. That is our review of Great Western Trail, Rails to the North, a glowing review.